Well, like I said, it's 6 o'clock. I'd like to call you the Historical Commission for February to order, and thank you for coming this evening. The commission was set up by the City Council of Lancaster in 1999 to advise on the projects being done in the city to maintain the integrity of the district, historic district. We're a recommending board. We make a recommendation, and the City Council then decides whether or not to go forward with the project. Tonight's meeting, the commission will review 2 proposals for voting and make a recommendation to City Council. We will then be presented with a conceptual discussion about a 3rd project, which we will not be voting on. It's just to get a feeling so that we can talk to the architects and whatnot to see if the project, if we have any advice for them. I would first like to take a moment to greet our newest commission member, Alex Folk. If Alex would like to introduce himself to the group for a minute or 2, that'd be fine.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Like the chairman said, my name is Alex Folk. I live on the 600 block of West Chestnut Street. I've been a Lancaster City resident for about 5 or 6 years. I work at Arconic, we used to be Alcoa, we used to be Alimax. I'm an industrial hygienist, which Gary was telling you Millersville University, I guess, is well known for. I did not attend Millersville, so do not hold that against me. I'm excited to be part of the commission. I chose to live in Lancaster for its architecture in part, for its history in part. So I'm hoping to add to the discussion and continue what the commission's mission has been. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 1 on the agenda is approval of the minutes from our previous meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It carries. Now we start with the old business. That's the project at 551 West King Street. If they would like to come forward and Suzanne, would you like to read your...
The commission originally reviewed this in January. It was tabled. I do not have an updated review, but they were asked to submit color renderings and to reconsider alternatives to the proposed garage door and explore other siding materials. And it's for construction of a 1-story rooftop restaurant addition on the building's 1-story rear L.
Would you like to address Suzanne's questions?
Of course, okay.
That's the next one.
My name is Michelle Folt. I'm from CGA Architects. I wasn't here with Chuck last time, but I'm here this month, so hopefully we can get to an agreement and we can start some construction. We did decide to, part of the concern last month was the galvanized metal siding on the exterior. We did decide to change that to a fiber cement board and batten siding. And I did bring some images along of both the fiber cement siding and the overhead garage doors. I do have quite a few copies. So looking to do a darker color in the fiber cement, probably a blackish brown tone to give some attention to the addition. I don't want it to blend in completely with the brick building. We also brought some of the trim details that exist on the corner of King and Pine around to the Pine Street elevation where we have a new brick parapet wall. So we're tearing off the metal mansard roof that is there right now. Where we do build new parapet wall, back will be brick to blend with the existing brick, and will divide old from new with the same trim details that exist on the corner of King and Pine on the original house structure. As for the overhead doors, we did decide to keep the overhead doors because we'd like to be able to open the space up in the summer and get airflow across the space. I did change it to a wide style overhead door so that it looks more like storefront windows when it's closed and gives the appearance of a more residential look than, I never intended for it to come across as an auto body glass overhead door. It's supposed to.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's supposed to look like a high-end overhead window, for lack of a better term.
And your example of that is?
Yes, the top image, that is an overhead, a wide style overhead door. That's actually in a residential application, but that is what a wide style door will look like. The one below it is a commercial application.
This is an example of what you're not doing.
It will be a little bit wider than what is in that second
second
picture.
one? Okay.
Yeah,
It's a little wider.
it's a little bit
wider.
wider. The stiles and rails will be a little bit wider where it
Closer to the top.
separates the glass.
Well done from Lance.
Thank you.
Are these going to be 16 feet wide instead of 4 smaller ones, or is it going to be 2 large ones?
It will be 4 openings that are 6 feet wide each by 7 foot tall. Unfortunately, I didn't have a picture that was 6 foot by 7 foot. So yes, that's a double garage door, but each window will be 6 foot by 7 foot.
And it's not going to be a problem with it rolling up on the inside and people seeing the garage door over their heads? Okay, that was a question that came in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't see that being an issue. We have plenty of clearance on the inside to be able to get the doors completely up. We'll have on the back side, which faces Nevin, the other small alley back there, there will be some operable awning windows so that in the summer we can get some cross breezes through there and take advantage of having an open space.
On that face.
Completely opposite this
Yes,
space.
yeah.
Yes.
All right, I just. Any questions from commission members about the changes and their appropriateness?
Just a question about insects. You're gonna open these doors and people are eating and beveraging and...
Just like outside.
Yeah,
just like...
it's just like outside dining.
Yeah.
Fresco dining.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
It's all the rage.
I appreciate the effort you put in.
There is a door too
changes.
that blocks the downstairs area. It'll be a glass door that will separate the air conditioning area as well.
What's the sill height of those garage doors?
48
In charge-
inches.
Okay, that says 48.
Yes, 48 inches so that we don't have to do any type of open guard or
Any
railing. Didn't want to have to deal with the very uncomfortable looking up a story at
Yeah.
people's feet.
Yeah.
Or other things.
Whatever, yeah.
Yes.
You did well.
Suzanne, was this enough for the colors that which they talked about here to satisfy? Are there any questions from the gathering here about the project? Okay. Could I hear a motion?
I hear some chatter. Is it possible to have some of the renderings up on the screen for the audience to see as well?
I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
Yes, it is possible, but
Possible.
We can try.
if not, I'll turn mine off as well.
I was gonna say, I can absolutely tear mine off as well.
I mean, it just,
Well, if we can get that overhead to work.
yeah, I don't know.
It's hit or miss.
I think I'm gonna hit one.
Gary, let me know if you need to phone a friend.
Is there a 12-year-old in the room?
You hit enough. You hit enough.
Something happened.
Yep.
Now, let's see if it's back
No,
to
slide that down to you.
Yep, there it
Take
is.
it. Oh, there you go. Hey, whoa.
Wow.
Quiet applause.
See if you can get that forward. There you go.
Okay, that's terrific.
Quite a drastic difference from what was presented
Oh, yes,
last month.
yes.
So they've taken our comments into consideration and blended it more with a neighborhood feel than an industrial feel. So they've responded well, I think.
Did you say you're gonna overlap the fiber cement siding onto just the back corner of the?
Just the back
just
corner,
that
so we
2,
can
3 feet,
actually,
whatever it
yeah,
is?
so we can
'Cause
get
it-
the roof
Because the roof is out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and the addition, the house and what's the bar area right now aren't actually on the same plane.
Right.
There's a jog
Yes.
now, so we're gonna take it out past so we can get the roof down and not have a water damming
Yep.
issue.
Okay.
Anything else? I'm still waiting for a motion here.
Well, I'll move to propose that we accept this application as amended per the commission's request, and forward it to city council.
Do I have a
For a
second?
vote.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor of passing this to the city council with our approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No one opposed. We will send that forward. She'll tell you when the next city council meeting is.
It's going next week to city council, February 26th. You do not have to attend that meeting. I'm going to send you a letter saying, giving the motion, and then when it's approved. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Good
very
luck.
much.
Appreciate it.
Okay, now we move to item 3. That's 517 North Plum Street. Suzanne, would you like to?
It's settled here.
Okay.
This is a request at 517 North Plum Street, although the historic address was 465 New Holland Avenue. And the request is to demolish a 1 and 1/2 story brick warehouse building to allow reconfiguration of the lot to create additional surface parking spaces for the submitted proposal. And my review is appropriate with clarification. The existing brick building is a partial remnant of a larger historic structure that once included a 2-story front portion. Now surrounded by surface parking, the building has a limited streetscape presence. An architect's field report with interior photos was submitted with the application, indicating that the building is structurally sound, although there are no historic interior features left intact. The demolition request is not based on deteriorated conditions, but rather to support reuse of the larger historic building across the street at 454 New Holland Avenue. Removal of the building in this application and reconfiguration of the lot would create 32 additional parking spaces. The applicants did pursue an option for a long-term lease of a parking lot at an adjacent property, which was determined to be infeasible due to the presence of a city-owned storm sewer pipe at this site. When weighing demolition requests, the Heritage Conservation District ordinance stipulates that the commission should consider the historical and/or architectural significance of the building and the effect that the proposed change will have upon the general historical and architectural character of the area. The predominant industrial historic character along this block continues to be defined by the adaptively reused former Armstrong Cork buildings on the south side of New Holland Avenue, including Urban Place and the Science Factory. The ordinance specifies that demolition applications must be accompanied by a written description of the deteriorated condition of the building, as well as an explanation why stabilization, rehabilitation, or reuse is not financially feasible or desirable. For the application, there were no cost estimates provided, offering evidence that rehabilitation or reuse of the property as an alternative to demolition is not, quote, feasible or desirable. Commission may request this information or ask the owner to clarify whether rehab of the building in order to attract a different type of business or tenant was considered or explored. Demolition of historic structures to create or enlarge surface parking is generally inappropriate, but this building is already engulfed by surface lots. While the exterior retains most of its 19th century form, although not all of its original features, it is now an isolated structure which, set back from New Holland Avenue, has a limited streetscape impact. In an area otherwise dominated and defined by the adaptively reused historic buildings on the south side of New Holland Avenue, removal of this structure would have a limited impact on the overall historic character of the streetscape. This review references standards 1 and 2.
Would you like to tell us about it?
And introduce yourself.
Yes,
Sure,
please.
yeah, my name's Gary Whitmer. The building and the property is owned by my wife, Lisa Shirk, and Steve Hitchman. And we had worked with Hammel
Associates, Ted Vidoc, who couldn't be here tonight, as well as Cheryl Lund with DLA, in coming up with what's the best way that we can achieve our goal, which is completing the development of 454 Holland Avenue, which is our current occupied property. We have approximately 12,000 square feet on the first floor that is yet to be built out. And in order to accomplish that, which would pretty much be the final build out of the building. So the final space that's able to be developed is our first floor space. The development of that area is going to require additional parking. So that's why we put the application in front of you to understand exactly what that means as far as parking spaces and what's involved in achieving those parking spaces.
Were there any comments from council members, questions you'd like to ask and have answered?
So this is the overlay of the new lot?
Yes, that's the overlay. It shows up a little better in color, which I do have a copy of the color version. I don't know if you want to put that up on.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, the color is helpful.
Yeah,
It's a line on
it's a line,
line. You can see with the red there.
A copy.
Yeah. Using that one, I highlighted the building, so it shows where the building is a little better.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. Slide that one.
Yeah, slide that one under, because that shows where the building is. So you can see the spaces underneath there. But essentially, to achieve our goal, which is building out the first floor, 12,000 square feet would equal, I think it's 24 spaces that we need. Like 12,000, so it's 500 square feet per parking space for the use that we're proposing. So we would need a minimum of 24. This allows us 32 spaces. Without the building there, it only, with the building remaining, it only allows 18 spaces. And it doesn't enable us to achieve our goal of the building. And as Suzanne had mentioned in her write-up, I mean, this is really the continuation of the adaptive reuse of the building across the street, which was part of an important cop and our building now, which is a piece of that entire reuse project. So in order to do what we need to do, we need more parking. But we've also met with the stormwater folks and have talked to them also about some needs that they have in an alleyway that we've talked about how we might be able to contribute to that program. Stormwater is a big issue right in this corner. So there's definitely some improvements that can be made by moving forward with this project and the demolition of the building.
Did you explore the possibility of rehabbing the building for alternative uses?
Yeah, we have to the extent that it meets our goals and our objectives for the property. Our objective is to create more office space, and any other use of that building wouldn't allow us to achieve that, primarily because if we use that building now, we don't have enough parking for the continued use of the building as office space. So that would be an inhibitor to our plan. I'd also, based on Suzanne's comment, I have CHE had put together a summary and a cost estimate of what it would cost to rehab that building. And roughly we're talking about $350 per square foot to turn that building into a functional office space. So that's in line with what our goal is office space, but the actual conversion back into office space in our mind is not feasible.
Wouldn't that require extra parking spaces?
Exactly. So it's a kind of a continuous loop that No matter what we do, it's going to require more parking.
Other questions or comments from the commission members?
I'll be honest with you, I must have driven past this site 100 times and I never saw that building before.
Well, I must admit, I spent a half an hour today finding it.
Yeah.
Because it was back there.
I was looking at the application, I had to go onto like Google Street View, and like, where is this building? I've never seen it before. So, yeah, I think because it's set so far back from the curb line, that it has no impact on the streetscape.
I was gonna say the same thing, that, you know, typically we wouldn't just demo it to demo it.
Right.
But, you know, when you drive down there, you see court buildings on the right side, you see cliffs, you see that building with the multicolored blue roof, but you don't see that, this building readily. You have to kind of look for it, you have to kind of look for it.
Yeah.
The other component of this also is, you know, the current use of the building across the street, which one of our tenants is the Lancaster Science Factory. And by improving the parking lot, we can also improve the flow of pedestrian traffic, hopefully, you know, make it a little bit more obvious where the crosswalk is and that type of thing, so that we can, you know, assist with the traffic that's being generated by the Science Factory.
Is there no more questions? Is there anyone in the attendees that have a question? Or yes, please, if you stand up and identify yourself and where you live, we'll use it.
Hi, my name is Emma Hahn, I'm a city resident. I was just wondering, when you say that it requires more parking, your redevelopment, do you mean that the ordinance requires more parking, or do you mean that you feel that there will be more, or could you just address the need for parking?
Yeah, the need for parking is ordinance driven. In other words, in order for us to build out first floor, the remaining space that we have square footage, we're required to provide one parking space for every 500 square feet of space that we build out. So it's definitely ordinance driven.
Sorry.
Well, stand up again.
Okay, follow up. And just with the mix of uses, I know you have a lot of different uses in that building. Is there any way that, you know, the uses might have different peak times? So for example, some occupants are there during the day, some are there during the night, like the hotel and the Science Factor, complementary, so that maybe there would be a way to sort of reduce the need for parking by, you know, in that way?
Yeah, the Quips, we lease the space to Quips, so most of their business is 4 o'clock and after. And the Science Factory's traffic is sporadic throughout the day and on the weekends. So, you know, that's, to that extent, that's how that is overlapped. The mixed use, the Lancaster Mattress is one of our tenants. By building out this space, they would be replaced by a professional tenant that would be office space.
That would not change the requirement of the code for parking spaces, whether they're timed out or not. You still have to provide.
Correct. Correct.
You mentioned that you had a report on the condition of the building and the cost to maintain it. I would like to see that as part of the requirement.
Unfortunately, I only made one copy, but.
Well, I'm number 6. Number 1 could see it first, I guess. There's 7 of us. He bumped me to the 6th spot, now he's 7.
I sat down with my name tag.
I mean, if it'd be helpful, we could read it out loud.
Do you want to put it on the screen?
Well, yeah.
Read it anyway.
Why don't you summarize
I was
what's
gonna say,
in this?
just read it out loud if you'd like. Basically what the letter says is, and I'll just read it verbatim just so I don't miss anything, but the following is a brief description of the amount of effort required, costs associated with the scope involved in an attempted renovation of the existing structure located at 517 North Plum Street, Lancaster, PA. These findings and assumptions were generated from a visual inspection on today's date, February 18th. All existing wood windows are severely deteriorated beyond the point of repair. This would require complete window replacement for each opening, which is not cost effective. Of the 16 original openings, 6 openings have been repurposed into doors or combined into overhead door openings. The reconfiguration would require extensive structural and masonry work in order to match the original facade. The building's built at soft planks for brick. Major spalling can be observed on each elevation. Approximately 35% of the existing wall area would require complete brick replacement. Approximately 100% of the facade would require extensive repointing. The southeast corner of the building had a structural failure. The result was a complete rebuild of this new corner with new foundations. This rebuild was not of historic accuracy and further degrades the facade's historic relevancy. The north-facing facade originally had a 6-brick corbel fascia. Currently, 50% of this corbel fascia is missing, with only a void that remains. Relaying this corbel fascia would require extensive labor and scaffolding to match with historical accuracy. The new Holland Avenue facing facade was originally constructed with brick. Currently, the facade has been covered with stucco, which has entombed the architectural details beneath. The existing structure has a new roof, however, it has no gutter or downspout system, which has likely contributed to the deterioration of the existing masonry. The existing structure has a basic building systems consisting of water, sewer, gas, and electric supply. In summation, an attempted historical renovation of the structure would require extensive structural modifications as well as building envelope improvements in order to obtain a hospitable space. If the goal is to convert this space into Class A office space, the cost could easily exceed $350 per square foot. With the building size of approximately 2,500 square feet, the project could cost $875,000. This high cost of renovation is due to the existing condition of the building, the relatively small footprint, and the cost associated with adding modern building systems to a historic structure. And that's courtesy from CGA.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions or comments?
I have a question.
If you would identify yourself, sir.
And excuse me, Randy Harris, West Chestnut Street. As part of the process of review and the recording of this document, is there any interest or effort by the applicant to document the history of the building? Because historic significance transcends the physical condition of the building, and we should be examining that and making that part of the permanent record, either through the administrative process or on a voluntary basis of the applicant, which would be very welcome in this case, because once it's gone, it's gone. I think we'll be talking about that in the next episode here too, correct?
Suzanne, would not your comments and be an answer to that question?
Part of my staff review has a historical and architectural description, which would be part of the record. I mean, do you mean photo documentation or just?
Well, mostly any potential association of people and events as part of the community's history should be part of the record of this passing and judgment on the
Well,
building.
it's part of my review.
That's, she read, I thought she read most of it.
No, I read the review.
You read the review, okay. Well,
Anybody who wants a copy,
you
my
can
hard
pick it up,
copies
there's a
there.
copy here, it goes through the history of the building and how it's been changed over the years to get to where it is at this point.
Okay.
But to his point, I mean, Suzanne has a larger historic structure. You know, do you have old photos or dates or anything that you would have put that in here if you had a specific date when it was built or in your review, correct?
If I had specifics in this case,
Yeah.
I was just going by when it first appeared in listings.
Right,
and maps.
exactly.
Estimates.
They didn't have the kind of permitting we have now to keep record of those kinds of things.
We're pretty good at record keeping in the city, so, I mean, I think it's certainly possible. Suzanne does a nice, overview, but doesn't mean there aren't more details to be discovered.
Is there a motion to adopt this project?
I'll make a motion. I move that this board recommend the city council approve the applicants for the demolition of the property at 517 North Plum Street. This recommendation is accordance, references section of interior standards 1 and 2.
Do I have a second?
Just a comment.
No.
Somebody has to second.
You can't, we're not to the second point.
I'll second it.
All those who are in
Wait,
favor.
you can still comment after.
Well, now we can comment, but you.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say, I may be the only member of the commission. My business was at the far end of Plum Street, so I drove by it twice a day. And I'm gonna vote for it, but I've always enjoyed the building. And I saw my wood shop in a building like that, you know, not having any thought as to what it would cost to keep the building from falling down. But I saw it twice a day for years.
That's a discussion. We could vote on this. All in favor of forwarding this to the city council with the recommendations? Say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
I have as a district resident, I totally see the validity of removing a structure that's surrounded by surface parking and set back off the street, and I think we could make an argument based on the Secretary of the Interior standards. As a historic preservationist, I'm not sure there's enough of an argument because it is stable. I mean, there's a cost associated with stabilization, but it's not impossible. So I think I'll, just for the record, oppose.
Okay. We have one that carries. Suzanne, you'll tell them when it's going to be city council and they'll get a letter. Yes, we did vote.
It's next week, February 26th. Council will vote. You do not have to be there, but I'll send you a letter with the motion language and then when the approval takes place. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
People making presentation on Spruce Street, they come forward.
Can I ask if there's a clipboard going around and we're at, oh, thank you. Thank you.
While we're coming forward, I'd like to, many of you have not been here before, and what we're doing now is having a...
We'll try and do this.
Okay, I would say, many of the people here haven't been in these meetings before and don't understand it. This conceptual discussion is merely a presentation to the committee to look at what they propose so that we can make suggestions or ask questions about it before they go through the formal process of applying for a permit to demolish the building and to build the new structure. We're going to have a presentation, then we're going to, the members of the commission are going to ask questions possibly, and at the end of that, we're going to ask you in the audience here to ask questions and make comments. At this point, I think I would, Suzanne, did you have a description you wanted to mention this time? Just let them go ahead. Okay. You identify yourselves.
Do you want me to have a mic?
Can we put some mics over? Yeah. Just the audience can hear.
So my name is Benjamin Myers, and I prepared sort of a summary presentation to kind of go over some highlights, partly for the committee and partly for the members that are also sitting and interested in what we're dialoguing about today. Just for context, actually before we get started, I do have some folks here from the different partners that I have been working on this project with. Cornerstone Design, the Horse Group on the construction side, Light Heigl on the civil engineering, structural engineering side, and then Everly Myers, which is the entity that currently owns the parcels, 2 parcels that we're discussing. But just a look at sort of proximity where it is in Lancaster. You can see the baseball field up Prince to the north there. We're down close to, well, directly adjacent to the police station, but the highlighted area are the two parcels that we're discussing today. And to give you some context of what we are proposing, we'll go over some highlights, but I just wanted to kind of move down the street from different perspectives so that you can see the images from a size scale. Just from a proximity, one of the reasons why we were really interested in both of these parcels. One, it did have to do with the character of the site and the historic buildings. Two, the proximity to a lot of different things in the urban core. It's a great walkable location, which is what we're really excited about doing in downtown Lancaster, promoting walkability and communities that can leave their cars. So we'll go over some building highlights. We're looking at north of 200, right around 200 residential units, not condos. They right now are the objective is rental units. And it is a 14-story structure. The tenant mix has shifted slightly since we initially started this conversation internally. We were looking at more of a diverse demographic from an age perspective, but in further conversations with the senior care provider that we are working with, just saw some value in being able to have a facility that allows you to age in place in the city and not sort of on the outskirts. And so we have tried to find ways of bringing diversity from the community's perspective into the building instead of just having the building itself have the diversity from a unit perspective. We are looking to find ways of bringing the community in from a view perspective as well, meaning a rooftop restaurant event space that can be rented out and or bar. There is Anytime Fitness currently there, and they will continue to be there after this project is completed. We are in conversation with other folks there, including Roberitos, but there's too much uncertainty about square footage. There's a lot of considerations with that. We don't know if they'll end up staying there or not. If they don't, we kind of hope that they'll find another location in close proximity, just because. We'll just leave it at I enjoy going there. Looking for another way to increase walkability. In that, we'd love to see further access to a grocer, at least a small footprint grocer, that would allow you to get your daily needs and not have to drive to a grocery store. Sort of the high-level community aspects, having an age-in-place facility, if you will. There's jobs associated with that. There are jobs associated with the Anytime Fitness and the restaurants. And collectively, I think it will be well north of 75 jobs at a real range of price points. Some will be well-paying jobs, some will be service jobs in a collection. The units themselves, there will be a mix of affordable and market rate units. And we will be really looking to find partnerships within the community in different capacities to bring the community in and either have synergistic relationships either with the medical field, the education, higher ed within the city as well. And this, we think there's a tremendous amount of value from an increased foot traffic standpoint for local businesses as well. So just want to speak a little bit to the design considerations. So we do have two buildings on site. The one has structural soundness enough to really be able to highlight that. So we're planning on restoring, adding value to the Anytime Fitness building. I guess it is the former Empire building. We were looking at ways of trying to maximize the visual component, I guess I could say, exposure maybe is another way to say it, of the 221, which is the Anytime Fitness building, which is why we tried to look at curving the front, I guess 3 levels, if you will. There's a ground floor, a mezzanine, and then 2 levels. So by curving that in, when you're walking down from a pedestrian standpoint, it does give a little bit more consideration to that building. And it also adds what we believe to be an inviting sort of entranceway. We will keep the drive path in the same location, that's the proposition, except for make it one way so there's not traffic going in and out, which is currently the condition. And just trying to find ways of activating the entry level just to make it more inviting to come in and utilize the either office or restaurants, the different sorts of commercial spaces in the building. We did look at the step back consideration at different levels, and we will explain sort of where those points are taking place and the reason why we have laid it out in that way. And design consideration, I mean, we were really trying to find ways of bringing the community into the building. So, just a quick highlight for each of the different level considerations. So we do have subgrade parking planned, and that parking is accessed from Market Street and not Prince. There will be a number of spaces subgrade. There will be some at grade as well, with a drive path and either an Uber drop-off or some sort of concierge drop-off. When you first drive in, it'll be to the left, right in front of the lobby. There's a loading area, which is towards the back of the building, and then several places to park, and there's basically 2 entries, one into the memory care and/or the back of the Empire building, and then the other, the main core of access would be into the lobby, which is the purple area right next to the drop-off area, if you can see that. The mezzanine level, so the first level has about 20, I want to say 24, 22 foot floor to floor, and part of that first level will give us capabilities of having a mezzanine. So we will have some possible small commercial space capabilities by doing that, and giving us access to the 3rd floor of the Empire building. The next level up would be assisted living. That floor is dedicated to the assisted living community. 35 residential units, or 35 units, I should say, with a dining and some support areas, salon, things like that. The next floor up would be 20 memory care units. The purple area would be sort of active and quiet lounges. Maybe this is actually where the salon is. Maybe stimulated golf area, community room, things like that, the building that the community would have shared access to. And this is also the main transfer point for folks that are living in the units above to be able to access their loved one if one of their partner or significant other would be in memory care while they're still living in the building above. So this is the main connection point between the residential units above and the memory care floor. So the design of the core of the building is a little bit like a Z shape, and part of the reason we wanted to do this was it really maximizes views all the way up. No unit has a bad view per se, and it allows us to step up the building behind the Empire building and not be directly on top of it, as it were. The rooftop area would be split into 2 areas. One would be access for the restaurant, and the other would have maybe some lounge space and some outdoor activity space for the senior community or active adult community there. So the consideration that we looked at from the delineation of the step backs, we really looked at sort of where is the scale of the current structure, which we'll be talking about later today, this evening. And that would be the first iterative step back, or I should say first step back. And we did that to maintain some level of I guess, sense of scale at the pedestrian level. And the other, the next step back in the building's facade is really the connected to the Ruoff Towers, which is on the 300 block, just up the street. So those are the two things that we try to have some sort of connection tying into as we're looking at a 14-story structure in this location. Obviously, really looking forward to the dialogue, and I don't know what the next appropriate step would be, but we'll probably connect into a model that we can actually move around instead of this. So as you guys have questions or comments, we can go down that path.
I would like to address the existing facade, 217. 227? 227, Gary Horning, building code official. The facade is failing on 227, what we affectionately call the Rob Burrito building. This was reconstructed on the first floor several years ago, I think in 2015. Engineering has shown and our inspection has shown that the second and third floor brick facade is failing. We have agreed to an emergency demolition of that second and third floor facade with this current owner. The repairs that were done prior to this were done under a prior ownership. So what we're going to do is move forward with that. They will have a stipulation and a memorandum of understanding that if the demolition of this building does not go through this commission and the city council, they will have to restore this per direction of this commission and city council to the original facade, brick masonry facade, okay?
So the building is currently condemned?
It's not condemned, but we did review this with their engineer study. The facade is, the bricks are moving from the prior repairs, both inward and outward from the plane. So the bricks are moving, the facade is moving, it could come down. And that's why we directed them to remedy that in the short term.
Yeah, they agreed to that?
This would be just the removal of the brick facade, and they are to stabilize that front wall with structural materials and weatherproof materials, and also address the roof leaks that have been caused or let go by the prior ownership. So they have to do that in the short term. That's our goal right now, to stabilize this building, to provide for safety for pedestrians and traffic on North Brick Street.
Have they agreed to do this, and what timetable?
They don't have to agree.
Well,
They're mandated.
Well, they're gonna have to agree to do it, but we don't have the time. We're waiting for engineering plans, which should come in the next week or two.
That's really not part of our look tonight.
It's not, but it's an issue that we wanted to put out so that the public would understand what's happening with it. So when they see scaffolding going up and things coming off, everyone understands at this point what's happening with the building. We're just doing a temporary stabilization of that front wall so people aren't hurt on the sidewalk and traffic on North Brick Street. And the owners have agreed to that. We've gone through that with them.
I'll just make a quick comment regarding that. So, I mean, obviously, this is the demolition is one factor in this project and our goal and desire to add value to downtown Lancaster. And when we acquired the buildings, our intent was to restore the fronts and to add density in the back. And when we did basically a building scan, we did a scan, the numbers came back, and it really prompted the conversation to shift into a life safety measure. And we have since then been actively trying to come up with plans and talking to the right folks, including Gary, to find the right path forward to make sure that we do address what needs to be addressed in the current time period. So we feel like we're running like crazy trying to find the quickest path to get to a safe structure from the pedestrian side. I think there's, based on the report, I think there's probably less risk on the internal, on once you're inside the building, and probably more risk of the outside, third layer of the brick, if you will, in certain parts coming off, or maybe based on snow load or something like that. There currently is a secondary structural wall in the building based on how the last repair was done. And it's actually in a place that we can move the structural load path from the very front where the bricks are to that. And that's right now what the plan that we're working towards. But at any rate, so that's, I didn't want to start doing any of this type of work, obviously. It's not ideal, the timing's not right, and we haven't had a conversation about it. And I understand the perception of what that looks like, but there's when it comes to life safety, I was a builder before. It gives, yeah. Anyway, that's an important thing that I feel I have mixed feelings about, but feel like it's the appropriate path forward.
So besides talking to Gary's office, who else have you talked to at city zoning or stormwater or?
Yeah, so.
Or we go first?
No, we had a preliminary meeting with different folks from the city, and I can't remember all of the folks there. I think zoning was there, Gary was there.
That's what I'm saying.
But yeah, Suzanne was there as well.
November 13th.
And initially, as we looked at what this site might look like from a new building, a new aesthetic on the street, we looked at, our initial thought was, if we're able to keep the current building, keep it. If we can't, we would rebuild the facade and then do something behind. And we had that was what we initially presented. And the takeaway from that meeting was, if you are going to remove a part of if there's justification to remove a historic building, it might be an appropriate time to have something new as the city continues to progress. So we sort of re-looked at what the site might look like from a mixture of old and new between 221 and a new structure at 225, 227. And so that's how we sort of started shifting the path architecturally or aesthetically to what you see or what you have in front of you and what we can walk through now. Absolutely.
Okay, I just make a quick comment. I see there are some hands going up in the audience.
I have a question for Gary.
I just wanted to ask you, I mean, I think we're going to hold off the audience questions until after the board has kind of finished our discussion. So, but we will open the discussion to the audience.
I'm Dale Yoder, president of Cornerstone Design Architects. And coming out of that meeting in November, I took some careful notes, and a couple statements that I, walked away with was, don't recreate the design, not a pale imitation. Buildings should look new. Don't recreate what has been taken down. Our first approach was to recreate that facade because it does have some very severe structural issues. If you walk past there and you see bricks hanging out 3 inches above the lintel, there's not much holding them in place above your head. And so there's a very valid concern about safety of residents walking past that building. So our first approach was to recreate that design in that building with a tower above it that pulled in some of the fenestration, more modern detailing of the Hager building or the Garbins building. We walked away from that meeting with the real sense that that wasn't an acceptable approach, and so we shifted gears and we went into a more modern mode.
Any more comments on?
Happy to. Yeah, I'd like to start, if I may. As I'm sure you're aware, there's been quite a bit of discussion online about this project over the last few days. Someone brought up a very valid question that I don't know that you'll be able to answer this or not, but As I understand it, this group of warehouses, your two properties plus the properties to the north, are listed on the National Register as a group. The question asked was that if this building is demolished, could that adversely affect the listing of the other buildings? And could you be negatively impacting the property value of the neighbors by risking their removal from the National Register?
Yeah, I thought that was actually a great question. I don't have an answer for you regarding that issue. It's definitely something that I have on the list. I mean, I've been seeing comments on the city's website and elsewhere, and making notes of all the concerns. They're not. This is a valid place to discuss that kind of stuff. So.
I just have a clarifying question. I have to say I'm just a little confused. I understand that this conceptual discussion is on the proposed demolition of this property. I've just been told that the demolition has been mandated and an emergency demolition is. Would that come up?
Just the facade.
Oh, so you're proposing
Or a portion of it. The facade.
of the second and third floor facade?
Yes, the facade only, not.
And only of the second and third floor
Correct.
of the entire building?
Correct.
The first level already had some great pre-work done. And I don't know if that happened during the structural repairs or when Robert-Rios, I think, came in.
Yes, it was 2015, I believe.
Okay.
Yes, first floor was completely
Correct. Yeah, that makes sense.
So another,
Hold on, the entire first floor was not redone. Josh Eisenhower from Light Heigl. The entire first floor was not redone in 2015, just the, probably north half of it was done, and the south half was left as is. We've seen additional movement in the south half since then, as well as in the north half.
I would agree with that.
another question to clarify. In our information here, it says conceptual discussion for the proposed demolition. Are we not to discuss the design of the new tonight? Okay, so yes, we're not to discuss them, or yes, we can?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I couldn't
Yeah.
confirm from the way this is written. Okay.
And the site is in the city's historic district,
Yes,
otherwise they wouldn't be here.
Conservation.
It's conservation, it's not historic.
Yes, it is.
Well,
That's,
it's not in the heart, right?
it's not in the
Right.
heart, but it's
We're
in the
not the
historical
heart.
district.
Right.
All right, so.
Yeah.
Heritage
Heritage Conservation
Correct,
District.
correct.
Yes.
We don't have control over the car, we have control over the rest of the properties. And these are on the National Register currently. And it's by the decision to take down buildings that are on the historical register to build. That's something we have to take into consideration. We typically don't agree to tear down buildings that are on the historical register. I mean, we don't even like it when they're in the historic district and they're not even on the register. I just want to know that it's a really tough question right there, whether we tear down something to put something else new there, and how that's going to impact the entire area.
Yeah, globally, I have a couple concerns. One is that it's a hard sell to demo that building. There's reconstruction options to maintain what's there. And I wasn't in that meeting that you're talking about people building new or whatever, but that's a hard sell, one. And two, the other hard sell just overall is a 14-story structure, as you're probably aware of that. It feels like it was pulled from a block somewhere else, maybe in another city, and dropped in this block. So if you just stand on that block and well, there it is. I mean, I know that there's the apartments that are way down there, but even those aren't that tall. So it just feels like, and when you listed the items that you're trying to get in here, it feels like if you did a third of that and you kept your building at an appropriate height, it feels like you're trying to fit a lot into this footprint that way. So that's part of the question is how is it hitting 14 feet that you put 14 stories that you needed to do that rather than keep it at
4 or 5, you know.
Yeah, it's honestly it's a great point. And it's not a perspective that when we were going through the iterations internally as to whether or not we try to go 14 stories or we keep it at 9 or something like that. And it really comes down to this city desperately needs housing across the board. And the city is growing, more and more jobs are coming downtown. And honestly, if I could add more housing than 200 units, I would do it because I think the city needs it. Now, 14 stories versus something else, I'm staying within the zoning the CB zoning, which this is allowed by. I'm not seeking exception for this.
Okay.
So I understand size, scale, and perspective. And at the end of the day, it's a real hard thing to balance. If I had 3 sites, and I have more property that I want to see more density downtown, but if I have 3 sites, it takes significantly longer to get the same unit count, and honestly, we could use a couple hundred houses now. So it just, in 3 years from now, in 5 years from now, more and more need is going to be happening, continues to grow, and people like urban walkable locations. So as far as what is driving me as an owner to want to do something like this is not because of just the economic. It really comes down to the value and the need for housing, and how can I supply diversity, walkability, and promote that. So it's a challenging thing for sure.
Well, the real problem is the historical commission cannot consider those kinds of things in making our decision. We have to look at the rules and regulations set up by the Secretary of the Interior and City Council, and we have to look inside very tight parameters what we forward to them with approval or forward to them with their option to do something different. The City Council has a wide parameter to make decisions based on economics, jobs, and everything else. We don't have that ability. We have to look at very narrow core here about tearing down these buildings. That's the first thing we look at. And our rules say that we have to have a study made of alternative uses and costs, and we don't have that.
That's, well, in a conceptual discussion.
Well, I know, but I'm saying,
asked for
I'm
that.
explaining that those are the things that we have to look at. We don't look at how many jobs or how many houses or how pretty it is. We just have to go on our narrow rules.
Well, I think to further expand upon that, we do have a set of design standards that we need to consider. Suzanne was kind enough to actually provide them for us, so I'll just briefly kind of list them. Look at five basic features. We need to look at size, scale, and proportion. That's number 1. Number 2 is rhythm and patterns. Number 3 is materials and textures. Number 4 is architectural details, and number 5 is streetscapes. And in reading your narrative of the project, you're basically saying, yeah, we're not going to pay attention to any of those things, because you basically failed on all 5 points. You have not respected the size, scale, and proportion of the neighborhood. You haven't respected the rhythm and patterns, materials and textures. I mean, your narrative is actually, you basically did Suzanne's job for her in her review of the project if it comes before the Historical Commission for approval, because you're basically giving us a list by list, point by point list of how you do not comply with the standards. You're not using the materials of the neighborhood. You're not using the architectural details, rhythm and patterns, size and proportions. You're not respecting the streetscape at all. The streetscape is more than just a 2-dimensional facade. It's a 3-dimensional object, and that building has presence as a 3-dimensional object. And replacing that with a 14-story, forgive the term behemoth, right on the street. I just can't imagine how this board could approve something like that. Even if it's determined that this building is beyond saving and that it needs to come down, I think the first 40 to 50 feet of the new building needs to respect the scale of the street. And it can't be more than the height of the original building. Bringing a 14-story tower right out to the street is just, to me, unacceptable.
I definitely, don't get me wrong. I mean, I am familiar, very familiar with the design standards, and I understand the perspective, and I understand where the committee, where the committee's dialogue and pushback is. And at the end of the day, we, even though it doesn't look like we took into consideration those things, we actually did, and we tried to find ways of finding a balanced approach from supply and demand, from value creation and things like that, with respect for this committee and the respect for the street, which is why we tried to do the breaks in the setbacks at the different points we did. It also is the reason for the curved front to help highlight the building that we are trying to restore and add value to. The size and scale of the exterior metal panels currently, it's a larger scale, but it mimics a brick in its form. So again, there's a lot of things that we actually are trying to speak to this committee, as you guys obviously have objectives, not objectives, but a design standard that you're trying to put out here for us to follow. This conversation, I mean, I definitely get it. I understand it, and it is. I love Lancaster for its historic buildings, no question about it, and that's why if I could save both of them, I would save both of them. Would I still come before this committee and ask for a 14-story structure? I would, and because I am I'm a believer in balance with preservation and an eye or a nod to the future and the need. So I'm torn personally with this conversation and what this is doing as this conversation will continue. But it's just something that I feel like I think the need from societal need, housing need, things like that are the reason why I'm continuing to bring it to the committee. And I'm looking for honest feedback. I'm not looking for, yeah, I am looking for honest feedback. I appreciate that.
Well, as Bob said, I mean, our scope of review is very limited. You know, we really don't have any jurisdiction over, you know, need for housing.
Sure, understood. Understood.
You know, and that need could be met somewhere else. You know, vacant lot 1 block north.
If I own that building, that's what I would be doing.
2 blocks south. You know, there are lots of surface parking lots and vacant lots in the city that still meet your walk scores, that can meet those needs without, you know, the demolition of a National Register listed building.
In terms of our conceptual review and sort of discussion, I mean, I'm not sure what feedback you're looking for from us, because it seems to me that you're making the decision, as you just said to us, that essentially you're going to try to leapfrog over us and go to city council, which is totally your right. You know, understanding that we won't approve it, but we're only a recommending body. What can we give you as feedback so that when you do come to us, there's something worth reviewing that you think, you know, might have some historical merit, you know?
I mean, honestly, material choices, I mean, there's a whole lot that you all can speak to, regardless of some differentiating points. Obviously, you're not going to want to see a 14-story structure. But I would love to hear, does the intended size and scale of the metal panels, does it resemble brick? Are there ties that we can help accommodate a more thoughtful consideration through this process? And the reality is this, I wanted an informal review. I understand that this committee is not likely to approve this, but at the same time, the conversation needs to be had, and I didn't want it to feel rushed. So the informal allows the community, it allows the committee to have a good dialogue about this so that voices are heard. And it's not, I mean, it's really easy to look across the table at me and say, what are you doing? right? I mean, there are folks in the city will have that perspective, no question. And the reality is, we have a heart for the city. We have a lot of, we think the city is tremendous, and we want to add a ton of value. And we are looking at other sites. We would love to have access to something like that, to do something like this, or maybe a different proportion scale. But it's just not the reality in my current asset. I mean, it's not what I currently own. And I have been pursuing things like that. And I love this building, and I love the idea of melding old with new. So even if I had a parking lot that I could buy, there's still a ton of value on this site. It's right next to a police station. There's so much in, je ne sais quoi, what is it? I mean, there's something about this site and the location that I would choose over the parking lot on the 300 block of North Prince. So I wanted to come before you guys in an informal context because the conversation needs to be had. I wanted to give enough time, adequate time, so that it didn't feel rushed. That's really our heart in this process.
My question earlier about who you had seen was partly because it seems like you're, 50% CDs. It seems like you're, I mean, you're so far along. It looks like where it's coming. Right. It comes just looking finished, and it seems like it's a bit like, to your point, like skipped over this discussion, and you've had a lot of conversation before this, so with partners and everybody. So there's a lot that's already gone into this. Yeah, I mean, specifics. I don't know. Personally, I feel like it's almost. I mean, we can talk about it, but to talk about a brick type on a 14-story building that we don't even want there doesn't seem to make any sense. I mean, I'm not a fan. I mean, going into specifics, I'm not a fan of the curve. I don't think it helps accentuate that building. It's lost that facade there. That if you're demoing that facade that's right there at the pedestrian level, I'm not sure if that actually helps what would have been that group of buildings. It accentuates the loss there, along with a different type. And then the setbacks are meager in terms of that. I mean, there's a line, but Steve's point, it would have to set back a ton for it to be respectful to the street, and then to allow any sort of multi-story building way above. So
sure. There's
some, huge hurdles, I think, still.
It is taller than the Rice building. 14 stories.
They have, I think they have higher floor to floor dimensions. But that's an interesting, now that you mention it, if you go, I'm not the same architect, but if you go to the photographs in the early 1900s or the late 1800s and take a look at downtown Lancaster, in fact I have some, and you look at Central Market, and you look at the old historic brick building that was on that corner, and how dare that architect come in and put that Rice Tower there. And
if I were in the Historic Commission back then.
There's a tension here, and I feel it. My office is in the attic of the old post office building, taking a space that was underutilized since 1928 when it was built, and creating space that is useful in 2007. I have done a lot of adaptive reuse. It's great when it works out. I say, let's go for it. But there's also a reality. I'm a farm boy. We don't need 200 units spread out across the farmlands. Zoning, I know you're not dealing with zoning, but zoning does allow it in this district, and so it's a matter of why not maximize the density in a place that is called for in terms of urban growth development.
It's just outside of our scope. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the thing is.
The thing is also, I mean, that you're referring to the 150-foot,
Right.
height limit. But that's a height limit. Right. It's not a mandate.
Right.
It's also, and it doesn't relieve you from the responsibility of our design standards, which are to respect the size, and proportion of the neighborhood.
I would like to correct, though, the statement that you made in relation to the write-up. We acknowledge that a 14-story, the write-up simply acknowledged that 14-story building is going to be tough to meet the scale and of the street. We acknowledge that right off.
Well, no, it's not, if you set it back from the street. You know, if you were to provide a 30 to 40 foot setback, roughly the same scale of the building you're proposing to tear down, you've respected the street. And then, you know, what you do beyond that is, you know,
Should that building look like what's there now, or should it look different? That, I think that's the kind of conceptual review.
Well, I don't think a historic reconstruction of a National Register listed building is a bad thing. You know, you don't have to replace it with a brand new building.
Well, it should not be an exact recreation.
It should be respectful of.
Well, why can't
Well, this is the design challenge.
Yeah.
Either it has to be compatible or differentiated.
But
There
why-
is a wide scope where that can be achieved.
Why can't it be a recreation? I mean, it was done with the Thaddeus Stevens historic site. It was a recreation of a historic building. That building did not exist
But it was
in that
based
form.
on historic documentation of what was there before the facade got covered up.
Right.
They didn't tear the whole thing down and just recreate it basically.
Right, right. Well, and we're talking, you know, this building, I mean, you could conceivably keep this building.
Oh, there's an
It's, you know, given, you know, understanding that the facade is falling down, replace the facade. There's ample, you know, photographic evidence. Any quick Google search, you know, or you know, the LancasterHistory.org has an amazing photo archive. I'm sure you can find what that building looked like to be able to reproduce the original facade.
I'm definitely not opposed to that mindset, to that thought process. To me, and that was the initial intent. I mean, we were looking at a building, wondering if we could save what was there, was the secondary option to rebuild what was there. But that's one part of the conversation. The other is that if I rebuild what is there, I'm probably going to propose a 14-story structure a couple feet back from that. It's not going to be 30 feet, otherwise that site's not big enough to allow me to accommodate more than, I mean, it would be a really challenge to get the cost metrics to work on a 14-story structure in that context. So, but I'm definitely open. I mean, that was the initial intent to begin with, was to rebuild the front facade. But we're open to that dialogue for sure.
But are there issues beyond just the first 3 stories of the facade?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're looking for constructive, you know, criticism for the next round of review, talking about materials. I mean, I really, looking at it, there are too many materials to me. You know, I just think it's variety for the sake of variety for the sake of being new is not really, I think, something that we're looking for. The balconies on the street, you know, have a different, you know, I don't think those are necessarily appropriate for Prince Street either. You know, the rhythm and patterns of fenestration, you know, it's just, you know, your building does, I understand it's a 14-story building, it's a different scale, but your fenestration patterns aren't respecting, you know, the neighborhood either. I just, like, I would feel much more comfortable if the building were, if the tower were set back, if the facade were simplified, fewer materials, simpler fenestration patterns, more regular fenestration patterns.
That's really helpful.
I will tell you, after reviewing the structural engineer report, the building has a lot of challenges. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, the building's been neglected for decades.
It's been neglected, plus it's old materials, it's soft brick, it's soft mortar, and the building is failing. So it's a tremendous amount of money and energy that's going to have to be put into that to maintain or.
But that doesn't mean that we have to throw out all of these standards for the new building that goes in its place.
But you could end up with this building not going anywhere, continuing to degrade. That's the choice the committee has to be faced with.
Really, we can't make, that's not a decision we can make. We have to abide by the rules of the Secretary of the Interior, which is our platform. The city council can do pretty much what they want, and I appreciate that, and there are lots of good reasons for a building of this size. I appreciate that. But that's not something that we are allowed to say. That's just what we can do, what we can't do. And carrying out buildings on the historical register is a big step for this committee. City council can do pretty much what they want, but it's not within our parameter to make that decision.
I just want to comment on that this is on the historic register as a unit. 3 different buildings, but it's as one. Just a what if, and I don't mean to be glib. I listened to Gary, this building may fall down tomorrow. Then what? Are the other 2 buildings automatically taken off of the historic register? I mean, I don't know, but I don't think so.
We're not sure.
Yeah.
We discussed.
I guess one other question. You clearly, I'd like to know, not specific numbers, but you've looked at the economics of totally restoring this building, I assume.
So as far as totally restoring the building, my intent was never to keep all of the building. It was to keep the front part of the building and to restore that. And so, yes, there was an economic number for that, and the intent was always to demolish or request demolition of the back part.
Do we have any further questions? Should we open it to the,
Let's open it.
what's that?
I'm in favor of opening it.
Okay, you sir in the front row, you're closer to me.
My name is Jake Sittler. I'm going to be a tenant in the Teller Brothers Center, directly over there. I reached out to you guys on Facebook, but didn't hear back from you, so thought I'd come to the meeting. We are opening a cafe right there, actually. Yeah, CBD cafe and a Floyd Landis, my business partner. We'll be bringing in e-bikes to bring sustainability to the city. We've already been working with contractors in there. We're not touching anything. We're not touching the wood. We're doing nothing. We're respecting the building for what it is. It's an old tobacco warehouse. We're also bringing hemp processing facilities to Lancaster to support farmers so we can make Lancaster what it needs to be and help farmers. So that's a little outside of the city, but we are doing that in the city too. How are you not going to affect every business that is? And I agree, but not preserving, not just that, but also preserving what the whole entire, like the whole entire street represents. I mean, that street is a beautiful street, and that's why half the businesses are there, based on, you know, the...
Again, that's really not germane to what we're doing.
Well, I mean, businesses on the street they move in there because of the architectural value.
I'm talking about the historic.
I'm talking about why businesses are in there. That's why tenants buy move into there, because they care about the historical and what it looks like and the people that walk through there. I mean, would you not agree that totally sets a precedent for a street and business owners that were originally based on something completely different?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and honestly, no, I'm happy to dialogue with you after the fact too, if you want to. Speak to that street specifically as it relates to the historical condition, streetscape. That street has a tremendous amount of diversity in the structures there. The one side that we're on, less so, but you have PCAD, you have so a lot of metal on that building. You have the Benjamin Roberts building. You have, within a block radius, there's a pretty significant amount of diversity in the building type, and not all of it being specifically historical. So it gives a little bit, as I think about it, it gives me a little bit more leeway to add that sort of density or value, as I see it value. And I understand there's a value in a straight preservation context as well.
Well, tied into the Teller Brothers Center, I mean, we are literally sharing,
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean, that's,
yeah.
I would think you would want to keep that, you know, pretty flush with I mean, there's a reason that that's still there.
You have a comment, ma'am, would you
Yes,
identify yourself?
I will. My name is Moira Jean Fitzgerald. I live on North Mary Street, and I'm the former owner of Here to Timbuktu. I had that store for 29 years. I want to qualify my question for Gary with a little background that maybe not everybody knows in the city here. First of all, my building is very old, 46 North Prince Street. It's no longer my building, but it was soft brick. And it survived the demolition and the building of the Music Academy because the construction company that did it properly by drilling and rebarbing and pouring, stone and those concrete blocks and blah, 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 blah. But nonetheless, every day that I came in, merchandise was off the shelves and on the floor, okay? So I actually know what demolition does to a building. And my old building survived. Now, my question is, why would the city, I understand codes, I'm all for city codes, and I'm thinking to myself, why would the city give a permit for emergency demolition of a historic facade? Why wouldn't they give a citation to repair and make that facade strong and structurally sound? I mean, when parts of the Grice building were falling down in the square, they put up, and they repaired it, okay? They didn't tear the Grice building down, okay? And right next to, I walked all around the property, and I walked across the street, and I believe that that 3.5-story historic building with the little dormers on top is an integral part of the streetscape of Prince Street. And I feel that has to be kept, period, beginning and end of story. It's on the National Registry. You keep your old buildings. We are, after all, city authentic. And then I want to bring one more thing up. I watched the Federal Tap House garage get built. I knew that building, between them and it used to be the sub shop, now I forget what it is, was going to come down. Because the contractor who was doing that, all they did was spray concrete. I watched that pit freeze and thaw, and no rebar, no concrete blocks, no stone. They just sprayed concrete. It was a miracle that bus driver and the passenger didn't get killed when that building came down. I personally would think that, my question for you, Gary, is why would city code allow 227 North Prince Street to be occupied if it's so dangerous? And why wouldn't city code enforce our historic district and ask for that facade to be stabilized and restored like the Grice building was? That's my question.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Moira Jean, and I appreciate your store. I was in there several times when you had it. We are preserving the facade. We're asking them to take down the brick that is in movement, which I did inspect with their engineer. So I agree with the engineering report that there's brick moving in and brick moving out and that facade on the upper floors. All we're asking them to do at this point is to take that down, stabilize it, and then work through this process. Part of that process will be, if they do not get approval for demolition of this building, that they will have to sign an agreement that will require them to restore that brick facade up to those upper levels.
Just to clarify, so your words that you used earlier this evening, which, to be honest with you, scared the bejesus out of me. You used the words emergency demolition permit.
Right.
Okay, demolition means take it down. There's no word in there that says restore and stabilize.
Right, it's just the emergency demolition is just to remove the brick facade so that it does not come down on pedestrians or traffic on North Prince Street. So the intent is, again, that they have to bring that down with scaffolding on the structural scaffolding on the sidewalk for pedestrian traffic. And then they will be required to stabilize that building, and if the does not move forward with demolition of the entire building, they will be required to restore that brick facade.
Okay, I forgot one other thing. When you are looking at that building to the left, there is an open brick courtyard, okay? I can't even, and 235 is attached to 227 in the back.
Yes.
Not the front, not the original part. So this demolition and digging underground for parking, and now you're talking about this facade that's just a brick wall standing free, okay, it is anchored to his building. What are the odds that you think that that's going to be kept in place while they're doing any demolition? I mean, I just can say, I lived through the thing about the Bonton and Wanton Shans and all that, and I have never seen more people upset since then as now. If you guys lose this building, it's going to cause a lot of grief for everybody in this town, because there's an emotional attachment to our historic buildings. That's why, you know, the city authentic. It's not a fake PR thing. It's a real deal. So, I'm sorry, I went overboard.
I appreciate that. No, let me.
My passion is well known, but let me tell you, there's hundreds of people like me in the city.
No, I appreciate that. The facade demolition will not impact the adjoining brick facade that's there in the parking lot. They will be required to stabilize that.
What about the parking?
The parking will not be affected because it's just the brick facade. If the building demolition moves forward, they will have to address those issues with stabilization.
Which is my business that's opening this spring.
It's another subject, yes.
Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
I could see.
Okay, thank you. My name is Gloria Mast. I work for Visit Lancaster at the Square, and I'm also an architectural and art historian. And I'll be honest, the thing that brought me in here this evening, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the architects and designers, and also appreciate the commission sort of opening up their mission to allow this comment, was straight up the aesthetics. I will be explaining to every visitor to our city what is that building doing here, probably 4 or 5 times a day. And I guess my challenge for you guys is to think about the materials. I mean, my first thought was, this looks like what happened to Eastern Market in DC. And if you've been through that neighborhood in the past 2 years, it's unrecognizable, and it's full of empty retail shops. New ones, not old ones. It's an interesting experience, having traveled there multiple times in the past 5 years, to see how quickly it changed, and it looks like that. And so I really challenge you to dig into your materials, look at new things, and follow those actually very clear directives. And the other thing that brought me in the door is the height. I think it comes down to perhaps listening to you guys, perhaps it comes down to a numbers issue, like how do you keep it affordable? Well, then you put more on there. I'm sure that's what it is. But also, you know, thinking about the character of our city, when you start to get that built up atmosphere of guests that come in, and just to be clear, we do need the guests. We need that income to visit our shops, to visit restaurants. When our guests come in, they like that this doesn't feel like DC or Philadelphia in particular. And then my other comment from looking at the designs tonight is your front area there that's recessed back is, I question some accessibility issues in terms of both ADA, and then also that's a skateboarder's paradise. So either work with them or change the design, because if you want to build goodwill in this city, don't be having people chase the young folks off every 5 minutes when they're doing something besides texting or playing video games. Thank you for listening.
Ma'am, you had a.
My name's Trish.
I can't hear you.
My name is Trish Underwood. My question is, why is it that a building, like Trophy Works, was required to repoint that building and stabilize that building, but yet this 227 was allowed to fall into such a state of disarray that raising the building is even an option at this point?
Raising the building is not
Not
an
an
option. I mean, maybe it's something wrong, but it's not an option. I mean, well, I can't speak to Gary, but yeah. What he's saying is mandated is a demolition of the second and third floor facade, the very front of the building.
But what happens to what you so politely put out there in the newspaper for all the vendors that are actually in part of Hidden Treasures? What are you doing for us? You've never reached out to us. These are supplemental incomes to us. But never once have we received an email from you, nothing, for a new potential facility.
I'm happy to speak to that. I have been talking with the former owner, who is also a current owner.
So he is in fact a current owner. So Steve Groff is in fact a current owner.
He is, yes, a part of the new structure, which was part of the, he's part of the new structure. And the reality is we have been speaking a lot behind the scenes of where we can possibly, where may be some opportunity spaces for you all. Have I personally spoke with you? No. I've spoken with Steve, and I've spoken with, and I'm forgetting his name right now, the manager at the.
You spoke with Tim.
Yes,
and,
correct.
And you know what? This is outside the realm of that. But please be respectful and reach out to all the vendors that are there.
I'm happy to dialogue with you further. Absolutely.
But my point is, architecturally, this is why people come to like the goodness, the structure. And how is it that just in the newspaper today, somebody can take that, the silkworks, and make apartments out of it? Granted, it's in Manheim Township. Why can't you do the same?
It's a great question, and a lot of it has to do with the land mass. That's 11 acres, and there's a tremendous amount of opportunity there for a more measured height, and it's also more of a residential area. In the urban core, typically, and by the zoning and the ordinance, the zoning and the ordinance is really put in place to kind of show where they want investment to take place. And there's a lot of flexibility in the height and scale for the urban core. And that's sort of what I'm responding to, and the reason why I'm excited about downtown Lancaster is because there's opportunity to add foot traffic, which impacts businesses, small businesses positively. So that's the, I mean, don't get me wrong, I hear you loud and clear. I understand the frustration, and I understand that you don't feel like maybe your voice is being heard. And I'm happy to dialogue with you further about it. I just think there's a lot of opportunity and value to add to downtown Lancaster, and I love the location. And we're trying to restore the historic aspects of the site that have the capability of going down that path.
The second question is, right after we had a meeting with these from the current owners, 2 days later they were drilling, but yet no permit was posted. Where were they?
I'm not sure what drilling, we can talk, I don't know what drilling you're talking about.
I don't know that we really can answer questions like that. That's something for zoning or city council, for the city.
Are you talking about geotech bores, like where they're drilling into the ground? Yeah, so you have, there's a process to be able to do that, and that process was followed. So, I mean, as far as the site work, the geotech bores, yeah. I'm happy to look into it for you, but.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sir, maybe the last question possibly, would you?
I know that this meeting is pertaining whether we destroy a building or not.
Name, please?
Oh, Adam, I'm sorry. Adam Stick, Steelers. What I'm wondering though, is this building that you're proposing, is that seriously, genuinely what you want?
Or are we aiming real high, knowing the community hates it, and then we're gonna negotiate down to like 6 or 7 floors where you actually want?
Yeah.
Is it, you know
It's
what I mean?
actually a really, yeah, I appreciate the question. And the honest truth is, I actually really like the aesthetic of the building. A lot of the aesthetic of the building was driven by me personally, and I have an art background. Everyone has different perspectives, and I understand that not everyone is going to be in love with the building, but a lot of the design directives was a collaboration with Cornerstone Architects and myself, and I'm excited about it, and I understand not everyone necessarily will be. 14 stories is where I would like to be. My goal is not 9 stories. Yeah. I'm happy to continue this conversation too later.
Thank you. I'm Doug Kitch, living in Heaven Street. Just a comment, really. I hear you, and I understand as a business person and as a landowner that you want to glean as much out of your property as you can. I hear you saying you've done everything, you've thought through everything, you're doing things with respect to the city, respect for more business coming in and so on. And that, to me, is where I just shake my head. And I think, is this such a bias? Because if you have any respect for this city, if you have any respect for the people, for the businesses, to plunk a 14-story high, kind of, sort of historic-looking thing into that street and feel good that you've added to the city, I just, I'm sorry, sir, but I just can't believe it. Thank you.
Hi, Steve Murray. I'm a city resident. First of all, I agree with Moira that the talk in the town about this is the only thing that surpassed it was Bonton and the Watershed building. I agree with everybody's comments, especially Mr. Funk's, raising the issue of the 5 guidelines, that none of them are being met. None of them are being met. And lastly, well, 2 things. This gentleman hit the nail on the head. We've worked really hard to establish Lancaster as it is. And when I was in business for 38 years on North Queen Street, and people would come in from out of town, I would love to tell them the story about downtown. We're all mom and pops. We try not to duplicate each other's merchandise. We don't even have a Starbucks. They love that. They love that. We're getting one. Now, one thing that hasn't been talked about tonight, that you all are charged with on this board, is you're not allowed to grant demolition because of neglect. You can't do that. It's against the law. All right? So these guys here can't demolish that historic facade and not rebuild it. It's against the law. You'll be breaking the law. Are you asking these people to grant you approval to break the law? I don't think so. You seem like you have a good heart, and you guys have been involved in a lot of stuff. Very diverse. Hats off to you. But we're talking about North Prince Street and downtown Lancaster, Pennsylvania, all right? That's the key. You can't grant demolition because of neglect.
Steve, I will address, thank you for that, but the emergency demolition of just the facade, that's all we're talking about tonight, that we've issued them permission to do, is to stabilize the front of that structure.
I understand that, and
okay.
I don't have any problem with that.
And they will have to rebuild that if this approval for complete demolition does not go through.
So the owner will then have to be held responsible to fix what he's neglected for forever.
Yes, and let me qualify that this owner understanding that the prior owner is a partner in this.
Who's neglected the building
Has
for a
ne-
long time.
Correct. Has
And has
neglected
brought it
it.
to this point, there's gonna be responsibility then for the future of this building on the current owner.
Yes.
Without tearing the whole thing down to get some sort of insurance write-off for decades of neglect.
Correct.
But why isn't the current
Ma'am,
owner
ma'am,
just
ma'am,
part of
ma'am,
this? Why aren't they
ma'am,
restoring it now?
You must be recognized,
All right,
please.
all right. I mean,
Moira,
that has not been answered.
I recognize
I
Moira
mean,
Jean.
why are we using demolition, the word demolition, instead of repointing, re-bricking, restoring? That's what I don't understand.
It's demolition of the facade on.
But that's the first crack in the building, so you're gonna take this building down brick by brick, piece by piece. You start taking anything off of the front of that building, and your people are gonna start picketing. They're gonna be so upset. Why not restore and repair? You're in the building business. You said you respected the building. You said you originally wanted to keep the building. Why don't you try to keep it? And I go back to the fact that this is a building that's occupied by businesses. You're putting people out of business.
I think there's a misunderstanding. The partial removal of brick is for the safety of passerbyers. Those bricks are being removed at this point, and it's going to be shored up until the rest of this project is approved or rejected. So it's, people will picket if somebody gets hit in the head by a brick as well. So that.
But the Bryce building, they fixed it. You put a new brick in. You put new mortar in. This is not some like complicated thing. Fixing the Bryce building with all that concrete ornamentation, that took years. And we had scaffolding for a very long time. So you're going to have now this beautiful historic building on the register with scaffolding and shored up 2x4s till we decide whether you cave and demolish this building. I object. That's it.
Thank you.
I've said it
Thank you,
as
ma'am.
clear as I can.
You had your hand up next. Would you like to make a comment, ma'am?
I think
Excuse me,
my
did you-
name is Hilda Sierra Majero. I think you guys should go and take some dirt to the hospital. You can't go buy that, demolish it, and put up the building. In fact, you don't even have to demolish it. Just build, make that into homes for the homeless like you do. Okay, that's it. We can talk about that.
I think in the hospital come before us.
We're gonna talk about it.
Okay. I think that we have exhausted the comments that we could deal with, whether they were germane or not, but we've given you some direction of how the commission feels, and I think that maybe we could take that forward to what you present next time.
Absolutely, appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you
you all
very
for your
much.
time.
That was the next item on our agenda is,
Do you want to wait till people?
yeah, I was waiting
people
for
wanna
people.
leave?
Oh, yeah, that's what. Yes.
Yeah, Darren, go ahead.
Oh, oh, I know. Have you?
Yeah.
I told 200 guys I did that. They're talking about putting a cafe in there. At least in my chamber.
Once a year, our
Adjournment. Those two things are very good.
I had a speech planned for adjournment.
They're always in order. But, one more minute.
I'm done.
The next item on the agenda is.
This is our truth man.
Just go with that. The next item is the election of officers. We have someone elect president. Who would like to be president? I don't think it would be good for you to be 2 years ago, someone else would probably really enjoy being president.
I nominate Mr. Peters to be chair.
Do I have a second?
What's it?
Are you okay with that?
Trissler has to agree with
Oh, does he? Oh, I didn't see that.
I will agree to that.
Oh, we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of Trissler will lead the charge, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? None. You got it.
What about our vice chair?
It's the current vice chair, he's giving up his seat, you need a new vice chair.
Was there someone who would be interested in being vice
You
chair?
guys just wanted like straight seats? Or?
That's the appropriate thing. You have to say
All right,
as vice.
temporarily, I will.
1 year.
Yeah,
One year.
I will agree to
You
do
will
that.
step in and Christopher can
Yes.
have a year like in April.
Like, if I keep my
Like
brain
an
together, yes. Okay.
So we need a
have a-
nomination for Bob.
I can't nominate myself. Nobody.
Okay, I will nominate Bob as.
And a second.
I will second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion that we adjourn.
Wait,
Seven.
wait, there's one more item on the agenda. Assignment of commission
Oh.
members to attend meeting.
Yes, we always.
Because we didn't have a unanimous vote on that one application, do you think it's necessary to send someone to explain why we didn't have a
If
unanimous vote?
Stephanie wants to go and explain her vote, it's generally we send somebody when it's a real split vote, and one dissenting vote.
Sort of ceremonial.
But if you would like to go and,
Yeah, you're
I mean, I've been to a number
You're
of.
always welcome at a public
Well,
meeting.
it's not February 12th, is it?
It's the
Next
26th.
week. 26.
26th, yeah.
Oh, I'm on the wrong, it's been a long meeting.
Look, you get the minutes.
Now, I'll send you the stuff that you
Okay.
you can if you
Yeah.
want.
I think I can actually check my calendar, sorry, is that?
I mean, if we need to appoint somebody, you can always call me, but if she's the
Okay.
one who, I mean, I understand what you said, and I,
We-
it's just,
We typically send somebody when it's a denial.
yeah.
I'll
oh,
go
God,
if I
oh,
can.
yeah.
I'll go
yourselves,
if I
one
can.
dissenting vote.
Yeah, I'll go if I can. Tentatively agree.
Okay.
7:51.
All right, motion to adjourn.
Second, all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yes, let's
We don't usually vote on adjournment, do we?
Yes. We should, I mean,
Is the chair just?
Yeah.